it's a bit like the NHS. You could spend the entire GDP on education and still you could say, well, actually, we could do with more here.
Well, actually, she hasn't sat down and talked to us about that. So it is her job to go to the Treasury and say that education is the most important element of government for her. You know, this isn't a game that we're playing versus the NHS. But GDP investment in education is some of the lowest in the OECD countries for education. And if they want recovery, if they want children and young people to succeed and move on to the next stage of education, and they want them then to go on to university or into work, they need to invest in education. Rishi Sunak talks about high skills, high tech. He talks about, Silicon Valley. But the reality is the majority of young people are being taught IT by a non-IT specialist in a computer room with aging technology that takes a long time to boot up, if they've got that at all. So, they have to think about what they're saying in the House of Commons, what they're saying on press conferences, and actually what they're doing for education. And it is her job. So I would expect her to be able to go into and negotiate with the Treasury about what her long-term plan is for the workforce in education.
Well, she may be doing that, and they're saying, sorry, coffers are empty.
Well, then she needs to try harder.
That's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was talking to a friend the other day who's roughly the same age as me. We were talking about our school days when I remember that we were told that the teaching staff morale was at rock bottom, that there weren't enough books and all the rest of it. And yet here we are 40 years later having exactly the same conversation. Why is that?
I think that is because there's a cycle of investment in education and it hasn't been consistent. So, when I think back to my beginning of my career, that I didn't think that there was a huge amount of money. I didn't think there was a huge amount of investment. But when I compare that to what there is in my last year of my teaching career, it was very different. But one of the biggest things that was different at the beginning of my career was time. I had much more time and smaller classes to be able to spend time with the students, going back over things or enriching their curriculum. And teachers are saying that they are particularly time short at the moment, and that class sizes are growing. So the more assessment you're doing, you're teaching to the test, you may be teaching out of your main subject, teaching your second subject more than you thought you would be doing. And that is all causing intense workload issues for education staff.
Well, lots of texts and tweets coming in. We'd like your phone calls as well. 0345 6060 973 if you have a question for Niamh Sweeney. Golden on Twitter says, hi Iain Dale, why isn't the main most nominated candidate, Daniel Kebede, invited with Niamh onto the programme? Well, we did invite him and he declined the opportunity to come on. You can't force people to come on the programme. I did interview him about, a couple of months ago, and actually was rather impressed with him. I thought he was a very, very articulate person, so I'm very disappointed that he hasn't come on tonight. But there we go. But if you'd like to put a question on any aspect of school education to Niamh, it's just schools that you're
schools,
covering, colleges as well. I think sort of when you get to the adult education sector, there's so much to talk about that. I don't know whether you cover that, but anyway, give us a call, 0345 6060 973. If you can't call, you can text 84850, or you can ask a question via Alexa. Just say, Alexa, send a comment to LBC and type in your question that way. You're listening to LBC. It's 16 minutes past 8.
LBC
LBC 0345 6060 973 if you'd like to phone in and ask Niamh Sweeney, Deputy General Secretary of the National Education Union, a question. So when did you last teach?
I finished teaching in January last year, so just over a year.
So you don't kind of need to get back and keep in. I was going to say, how often do you go into schools?
I go into schools quite regularly, and I went back to my old college and I taught a lesson recently. I felt really proud that, I hadn't lost my touch, and then of course the lesson ended and my colleague had to go off and teach 4 more, and I was quite relieved. But, it absolutely...
Do you miss it?
I do miss it. I miss the teaching. I miss the interaction with the students. I miss the subject. I missed, researching things. And
what did you teach?
I taught a mixture of health and social care and criminology post-16. So, there were fascinating
Those are actual
current
subjects
affairs.
at A-level now, are they?
BTEC and Applied
BTEC.
General
Right.
courses. Absolutely brilliant. Children, young people, knowing that they want to go on and work in social care, in healthcare, midwifery, social work, justice system, and really focused. And excellent current affairs. You could plan a lesson, but then something would happen on the news, and the student would come into you and say, "What about this?" And you'd change direction, and they were always really dynamic. But I don't miss the bureaucracy, and it was really, really tough work. Absolutely, my hat goes off to primary school teachers. I don't know how they do it.
See, Gillian Keegan's going to come and do a phone-in soon. I did one with her before, when she was Apprentices Minister, and I did the first interview with her when she became Secretary of State. And she does, the one thing she can do is communicate, because I remember people on text and tweets saying, "Oh my God, a minister that can actually speak human." And I think if I was going to say to her to do one thing, forget the pay stuff, but if she could reduce the bureaucracy and the workload, I mean, that to me would be almost worth the sort of 4% pay rise. Well, I know you're looking very sceptical at that, but do you know what I mean? Because over the years, the Department of Education just spew out circular after circular after circular, and I'm sure it's not just head teachers, but sort of deputy heads, assistant heads. I mean, they spend half their time on those.
So, it is two-pronged. There is absolutely a pay issue, and we need to look at pay restoration. The profession is not attractive enough to new graduates. The graduate recruitment market has improved since COVID, so not enough graduates are choosing to go into teaching. The government has missed its own recruitment targets in all subjects but 4
Is
in
the
the
Teach
last
First
year.
scheme still going?
The Teach First scheme
That's been quite successful, hasn't it?
It is successful, but what we find, particularly with Teach First, but across all entries into teaching, is that they stay for 2 or 3 years and then they leave. Now, that's great, but we actually need people to stay longer.
But some of them do stay, don't they? I don't know what percentage.
Well, I think 1 in 4 teachers leaves within 8 years. A huge amount, nearly 10% of teachers who trained in 2020 had left by the following November 2021. Now, that impacts on the relationship that you have with children and young people, because they've got teachers changing all the time, but it also impacts on the workload of the mentors, of the long-term staff that are there. Because if I worked in a school where there was a 25% turnover of staff each year, and that is really difficult. You're constantly replanning and changing and doing, trying to make up for the fact that you've got a new colleague and showing them the ropes. And you need people that have been there for a long period of time to be able to work with new teachers, to tell them which bits of workload they could leave and which do need to be done. But if Gillian Keegan is serious about negotiating, there's the pay issue, but I have a whole list of things that she could do about workload. We have the most contact hours in OECD countries. Reduce the number of hours that teachers teach and give them more planning and preparation time. Reduce class sizes so that they're having less marking to do, less assessment to do. And then also ensure that you've got funding for schools so that they can employ teachers, support staff. Support staff pay is really, you can't get support staff, particularly support staff for children with EHCP plans, to make sure that the children are getting the education that they are entitled to and that they deserve. We need to make sure that things we could do about removing the bureaucracy, about league tables, about grading of Ofsted, not take away accountability completely, but stop things like central data drops, stop sending out a circular to schools every Friday that without tracking track changes about what's new. Make sure that you're investing in the school buildings. There are all sorts of things that they can do. Increase pay portability so that when a teacher moves around the country, they don't have to take a wage drop, and ensure that our supply staff are paid appropriately.
Okay. Let's go to your questions. Nick is in Bromley. Hello, Nick. Nick, hello.
You last spoke about supply teachers. I'm a supply teacher who works for a pupil referral unit in Croydon. I completely and utterly support the strikes. I stopped full-time teaching 8 years ago, first of all because I thought I was going to have a nervous breakdown with all the hours and the workload, and secondly, I wanted to see my own children grow up. So I took supply so I could work basically 4 days a week. Now, lots and lots of supply teachers support the strike action. However, we are getting paid less than we were 10 years ago. You spoke on Sheila Fogarty a couple of weeks ago about AWR and how we can increase our pay. When a teacher strikes, full-time teacher strikes, they lose 1/365th of their salary. We lose a whole day's pay, which is quite a lot more. So many teachers are wondering, do we go into school on a strike day because we're going to lose so much? Secondly, many supply teachers are losing out on work because cover supervisors are brought in, or HLTAs, higher level teaching assistants. Now, when I first joined the union 23 years ago, one of the slogans was a qualified teacher in every class. What's happened to that? My third point.
How many have you got, Nick?
Sorry, this is the final one. I've been on an AWR claim that I've had.
Sorry, what's AWR?
It's average worker claim.
Okay.
So if you've worked for 12 weeks, over 12 weeks, for a company, you can claim the same as anybody else working there. Now, I've worked for the same school, for the same agency, for 6 years. I put in an AWR claim. The union said they couldn't help. I went to other members of the union who are part of the National Supply Teachers Network, and they've actually, there's a group of 6 of us, they've actually managed to secure £18,000 from one of our people, where the union said they didn't have a chance. Some of it is still going through. The network have actually got over £100,000 for teachers, where the union said they didn't have a claim. Will the union get a supply unit in and use the expertise of people in the National Supply Teachers Network who are all NEU members?
Right. That's a challenge for you there.
Sorry, it was a long one.
No. It's really interesting points.
There are 3 things in there, and I think what Nick talked about that burnout, that feeling of, needing to see your own children, about, the workload absolutely impacting on your mental health, your physical health and your family life, is something that lots of teachers recognise. What we have to do, that I think there's an approach to this, is working out. I think everybody thinks that teaching, because it's school hours, is flexible. I think they think that it is supportive of, reduced hours, of flexible working, of part-time working. And actually what many teachers report is once they go to part-time, they're working unpaid on their day off to do their preparation so that they can have a weekend. So we absolutely need to address those workload issues and ensure that that teachers who are under pressure or have ill health, many teachers talk about going onto supply because they have a disability issue and the school is not dealing with that appropriately. We need to ensure that as a union we are supporting those claims so that we can keep people in the profession. The thing about supply and the agencies, it is really difficult. We can't negotiate with the agencies, and schools are being ripped off, like many areas of public sector, services, with agencies taking off a slice from the top. So the schools pays the agency, and the agency only pays a certain amount to the teacher working, and that's part of the.
What would that typically be? What percentage do they take off the top?
I don't know what that would be, but teachers on supply are also not getting paid their qualification rate of where they would be on the pay scale. So they might only be offered an M3, a main scale 3 a wage for the day when they are more experienced. What we would like to see is more schools having the ability to, and more local authorities having their own lists of supply teachers, that agencies are not doing that, not ripping off schools.
But isn't that something
and
where
doing
your
that.
union could step in? You could actually start an NEU sideline, couldn't you? If schools are being ripped off, you could do a sort of ethical agency.
Well, we're not. It'd be difficult then that we'd be the union and the employer. That would be something.
Perfect.
Well, in many schools, what you do find is that head teachers have their own list. They have their own supply. They do also employ their own cover supervisors and HLTAs. And then you do have an issue where a HLTA might be employed to prepare, to deliver a lesson that's been prepared by another teacher, and they're not being paid the rate to do that. Nick, you raise your own personal casework issue that I don't know about and I'm not going to be able to answer here. The supply network support many members, or let us know that they support many members who are either members of the NEU or other trade unions. We haven't accepted their proposal to employ a member of the supply network because that's not how our structures are formed. We're a member-led organisation. We have a structure of staff and we deploy our resources in a way that the National Executive have accountability to oversee. But, we have done a lot of work with members from the supply network and with other members of supply and our executive. We have excellent members on our National Executive who are supply teachers, absolutely talking about the issues that they have. And where possible, absolutely a school or college leader, where somebody has been in post for the length of time that Nick says, absolutely should be moved to a temporary contract or a fixed term contract. That is it's not good for the school finances and it's not good for the member of staff either.
Right, we'll come to more of your calls. Nick, thank you for that in just a moment. But first, it's news time on LBC. It's 8:30. Here's Daryl Jackson.
The Home Secretary has asked for answers from Lancashire Police over why they gave out intimate details about Nicola Bulley's life. The force has now referred itself to the police watchdog over contact they had with the mum of two before her disappearance. Nurses in England are escalating their strike action in March by walking out for 48 hours along with A&E staff. Meanwhile, the RMT unions announced a series of dates next month. And the family of Bruce Willis has confirmed the actor has been diagnosed with dementia. His ex-wife, Demi Moore, last year. LBC weather: rain over northern areas tonight, cloudy further south with some light rain in the west and a low of 4 degrees.
This is LBC.
Sweeney with me, Deputy General Secretary of the National Education Union. She's running to be its next General Secretary. Gail, on a text, says, please could you explain what is meant by a membership-led union?
So our union, we have a staff who do the day-to-day running and make sure that things are printed and sent out to members, that sort of stuff. But a member-led union is it's our members that can put decisions about what our policy should be. So every year we have an annual conference. Members through their districts, which are their geographical areas where they live and work, get together. They put motions towards a 4-day conference that's going to be in Harrogate this year, that each district can send, depending on their size, can send a number of delegates to that conference, and we debate the motions, and each year the policy direction of the union is decided.
How has the conference changed over the years? Because I can remember sort of in the old days, you looked at the NUT conference over Easter and you looked at some of the people speaking and think, I wouldn't want my children being taught by that person.
Well, yeah, conference has changed over the years. I mean, and I was fortunate enough to go to both legacy union conferences, and they were both different and yet similar, talking about the same issues. I don't think, why would a teacher want to go in their holidays to go and talk with other teachers about education matters? It's because they're passionate about it, but they're also off duty. So they might not look the way that they would look when they're in the classroom, and they're a little bit more relaxed about how they talk, but they're absolutely passionate about the education system that they work in, and they need it to be better, and they want it to be better for the children. So we discuss a whole range of things about the education system, about assessment, about Ofsted, but also other issues that impact on the union. The governance of the union then is also member-led, so that is members of the union who stand for election to be part of our executive, the governing body, and they hold the members of staff, the Deputy General Secretary, the senior leadership team and the General Secretaries to account to ensure that we are implementing the plan and the strategies that members decide on.
Okay. 0345 6060973 if you'd like to put a question to Niamh. Tom in Sevenoaks has texted, can you ask Niamh what she thinks of home education? That's something we cover a lot on this programme. We've done quite a lot of phone-ins on it. And I always start from the premise that it's a terrible thing and that people should send their kids to school. And then by the end of it, I'm sort of half convinced that actually it's not as bad as I thought.
I think it's an individual choice, and what we do need to do is ensure that there is adequate support and monitoring, that we know where children are. I think it's really important that we know where children are, and if there's an active choice that parents or groups of parents have made that decision for whatever reason. Now, many parents make that decision about their children because they have special educational need and disability, and there aren't the school places. Now, I think are parents being forced into doing that? Is that because of lack of investment? We should be making sure that we've got an appropriate school place for every child. I think we need to ensure that we've got adequate support for children and their parents, so that they're covering a wide and varied curriculum. But I know people who have done it, and I've taught young people who have come to sixth form college who have been self-educated or home educated previously, and they are very different to their classmates. They have much more freedom. They aren't as test exhausted, but I think we have to make sure that they are getting there is a system to ensure that they are getting a well-rounded education that is appropriate to them. I think there are other things that school give. There is the social aspect, there is the extracurricular aspect, and I don't think it's something that I would do myself, but I appreciate that if parents make that decision because it is right for their child, and not because there isn't a school place available for them, then we should respect that choice.
Well, let's hear from Lisa in Faversham. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Ian. Hi, Niamh.
Hello.
What would you like to ask?
So, I'm a teacher and I'm also a parent, as obviously many teachers are. I went on strike a couple of weeks ago, and I fully intend to go on strike again in a couple of weeks unless the issue is resolved. For me, as a parent and as a teacher second, the most important part of our claim, I suppose, is the fully funded bit. And I think it's the aspect that the media generally passes over. We are striking for pay increase. I'm in a very lucky position in that the pay increase won't make much of an impact to me. But what is really important, and I see this from a parent's point of view, is that those pay rises need to be fully funded. Certainly my son's school and my own school are absolutely desperate for funds. I have to buy all sorts of equipment for my own classroom, and I'm aware that my son's teacher and TAs and so on do the same. Any pay rises that are awarded cannot come from existing budgets. It's indescribable, really, how strongly I feel about that. And so for me, the most important part is that fully funded. And just as a side note, I fully intend to leave teaching. I've been teaching for 23 years now, and I fully intend to leave teaching within the next 6 months. I've got a side hustle on the go at the moment, and I'll come back to that in a second, which will turn into a full-time job. And I forgot what I was going to say. Yes,
I'm just intrigued by this side hustle. I want one of those.
It's some writing. It's educational writing. But from my point of view, in the last few years, the only way that I've been able to carry on teaching in the classroom is to combine teaching with being a national tutoring programme tutor. So effectively I do 40% national tutoring programme, 60% classroom teaching. It is the only way that I can manage the workload mentally and physically. Otherwise it's impossible. And I'm a long time teacher. I've been teaching for a long period of time. And if I'm finding it difficult, goodness only knows how younger teachers new into the profession are feeling.
Do you have a question, Lisa? Because that's all really, really interesting. But do you have a question?
Yes, apologies. So my question really is, how do you intend to bridge this gap, really, between what teachers think and what teachers want and what parents want? Because there seems to be a disconnect. Many of the parents I've spoken to fully support us, but don't fully understand that link between the two.
No, absolutely. And I think that is our job as teachers and trade unionists, and why I'm on shows like this and why we'll talk about that. You're absolutely right that it is about a fully funded pay increase. The last offer was unfunded. Now, that means it has to come out of existing budgets. Now, schools were 90% of schools before that pay offer was given were already making cuts. And you've spoken about school teachers and support staff. I know that we did a survey a few years ago where teachers and support staff were saying that they were spending at least £700 and £1,000 in their own money each year to buy supplies for their own school. And I think parents recognise that. So parents see that equipment isn't being replaced. They see that school buildings aren't being replaced. They see that when a TA leaves, that the classroom support worker isn't replaced, that there is being a narrowing of the curriculum, because if your DT teacher leaves, you might not be able to recruit a new one. I've heard stories about dance lessons being taught in a classroom by a non-dance specialist and the dance studio being used for exams, because you're making use of the buildings that you've got. But I was talking to a head teacher yesterday that even with the £2 billion and the support with fuel that schools have had over the last couple of months, that he sat down over half term to do, relook at his budget and thinking about food and fuel and other costs that have arisen in his school, that he's now projecting a 10% deficit budget. So, we absolutely have to ensure that there is enough per pupil funding, but also additional funding going into schools so that we can reduce our class sizes, so that we can recruit new teachers into the classroom, and so that we can provide a varied and rich curriculum. Music, art and drama, IT, all of those subjects are becoming narrowed, and they shouldn't be the privilege of people that can afford to do them outside of school. So, I think parents hear us when we talk about, when you speak to a student who's doing their GCSEs this year, and you ask them how many maths teachers they've had in their school career, they will probably say 4, 5 or 6. You ask them whether they're being taught science by a science specialist or whether they're being taught geography by a geography specialist. These stories are real for parents, and parents recognise that. And we talk to parents, and I was talking to parents on the picket lines and on the demonstration last time on the 1st of February, and they were saying that they absolutely support us and they want the best for all children, they want the best for their child, and that they recognise that the lack of funding and investment in education is having an impact on their child's education.
But what about the argument that if you are taking your GCSEs this year, you will have only had one full year of proper education in your secondary school career because of COVID and other strikes. Does that not sort of make you think, is this really the right way forward? I mean, if the strikes can, we've got a question here from John in Cardiff saying, how long do you foresee the strikes lasting? Well, at the moment, given all the other strikes that are going on in the economy, there doesn't seem to be any glimmer of light that any of them are going to be solved in the next few weeks. This could really damage some children's education.
But I think teachers and parents recognise that COVID had a long-term impact and will continue to have a long-term impact on children, whatever age and stage of education they were at when lockdown happened and education moved remotely or for some in school. That will have a continuous impact on children, particularly if they're not being taught by a subject specialist. So, I know children being taught chemistry by a non-chemistry teacher and they've got their exam this year. But this year's students are not having any exam concessions made for them because of COVID, and that isn't right. So, the government needs to think and recognise COVID isn't over for those young people. There are young people taking their exams next year who have suffered bereavement, who have suffered anxiety and suffered isolation, that actually we need to be thinking, are the exams just going back to what they were pre-COVID? Is that the right thing for the government to be doing? Shouldn't we be putting in more support? Shouldn't we be putting in more support with counsellors and mental health support for children and young people? We've got so many children and young people in our schools from primary right through to secondary who are on a waiting list for CAMHS because there are no support services in their local area. And schools pick up all of those pastoral care issues on top of everything else that they're already doing. So that, it absolutely has to be investment in the next generation. And I don't understand a politician that wouldn't want to invest in the next generation. If you have a generation of young people coming through education who are fit and well, have good mental health, are able to make good decisions about money management and career development, then they're going to be flourishing citizens in the future. But if you've got too many children who are not getting a healthy, balanced diet, that are living in poverty, who are not having access to art, music, drama, things that bring them joy in their curriculum, or being able to take part in sports activities, then we're going to end up with a population that is unhealthy and unfit for work. And so you've got to think about the next generation, and there's nothing better than investing in a good education system for those young people now.
Well, Lisa, love to hear more about your side hustle, but we're running out of time. John on a text says, Iain has more side hustles than Branson and Musk combined. Fact. It's true. 8:47.
LBC
line on LBC, we have Niamh Sweeney with us, Deputy General Secretary of the National Education Union. She wants to be its next General Secretary. When do we know who wins?
The election closes on the 31st of March.
All right.
Get your votes in now.
That's the only bit of campaigning we're allowing. Right, let's go to Colin in Kilmarnock. Hello, Colin.
Hi, good evening, Ian.
Hi.
I've just heard your guest talk about teaching children to dance. Children don't go to school to learn to dance. Children go to school to learn maths, arithmetic, English, geography, history. Dancing is not what you teach children to do at school. I've never heard so much nonsense in my life.
Did you not do any dance? I remember doing country dancing at primary school. I hated every minute of it.
When it got to Christmas time, we'd go in the hall, the teachers do Highland dancing for a couple of days. Children don't go to school to learn to dance. I mean, what that woman said is ridiculous. When I went to school,
Hang on, that woman has a name, and her name is Niamh.
Niamh. When I went to school, we got given a couple of jotters, a pencil, a pen, a ruler, this and that. We didn't have these smart tellies which actually tell teachers what to do and this and that. We had one TV in the school and we'd book it in and we'd go and watch something on
it's
BBC
2023. It's not 1943.
So, Ian, what do we do then?
You move with the times, Colin. That's what you do.
No, we don't. What we have to do then is we all have to pay 60% tax on our wages. Same as the ambulances, policemen, fire brigade, everything's gone up in price. Hospitals, all equipment's gone up, so we all have to pay 60-70% tax. Teachers got it easy. My ex-missus was a teacher. She didn't work all night and all through holidays. I don't know where these teachers are coming from.
Your ex-missus, yeah. That kind of...
Ian,
okay.
She used to hand me a lot of jotters on a Sunday night and said, do the maths for the 7-year-olds. And I'd say 7 + 2 is 9, tick it because they got it right. If they got it wrong, I'd put an X.
Right.
Teachers get great money and they should be appreciative of what they get.
I'm sensing steam coming out of Niamh's ears at the moment. Would you like to respond to Colin?
I mean, yes, absolutely. There are traditional subjects, English, maths, numeracy. You would expect children to be able to come out of school having a good grounding of all of those things. But if we narrow the curriculum too much and fixate on one subject at the jeopardy of others, we're limiting children's opportunity to have enjoyment and curiosity about experiment. We've got a very narrow curriculum in England where we fixate on testing in English, maths and science, but we don't necessarily test the things that children need to use going on to the next stage of their education or in work. And I really dispute the fact that if someone would say that dance isn't important or art isn't important or history isn't important, that all of those subjects bring in huge amount of money to our economy. Theatre, music, drama, technology, media are all subjects that are relevant for children to be learning about. And it might be, that they are cross-curricular. So in music, you learn a lot about maths and rhythm and thinking about time. And it is absolutely important that children learn about different subjects through different medium. So, I dispute that. I think there's got to be some joy. Sometimes sitting in a classroom is hard. You've got to get through. You've just got to learn something. You've got to learn it off by heart. But you also have to think about the experience that children and young people are having, and that you might learn through history about mathematics or about English, about writing, about creativity, and how problems are solved. If we fixate on testing and teaching children information so that they can pass a test, they then go out into the workplace and might not understand how society works or how democracy works. And those are really important things for children and young people to be able to experience during their school time.
Colin, thank you very much for that. Simon is sitting in a car park on the M1. He says, just started listening to tonight's show, Ian, from the M1. Who is your guest? She's excellent and should be given her own show. Well, that would be a departure, wouldn't it?
It would. It would be very nice.
You never know, stranger things have happened. Right, let's go to text. Why on earth are head teachers in charge or responsible for the budget and maintaining schools? Surely that should not be their concern, says an anonymous texter.
Well, I mean, schools are small businesses and, they have a huge responsibility in budget, the buildings, and we're seeing that since the demise of the local authority, since the government changed how schools are run, that most schools now have a business manager, or if they're small, then the head teacher absolutely has responsibility and the chair of governors oversees that. They employ numbers of people. They need to buy different services, and they oversee the budget of that school. It's a thankless task, and I think head teachers would much rather be out of their offices, talking to their school communities and being with children and young people and being able to teach. And I really, welcome head teachers that are able to do that. I think it's really important that they stay out as part of their school community. But they are bogged down by bureaucracy, by paperwork, by proving that they're doing different things in different ways, however Ofsted wants it to be done that day. And that is the role. And I think unless the government puts in additional support for them, we will see very many more of them leaving the profession.
Do you think head teachers get enough training? Because I can imagine going from head of geography to being head teacher in a large school must be quite a challenge.
Well, I think there is a progression and there are qualifications that head teachers need to do. But, we would see teachers, particularly in a primary school, being an assistant head teacher or a deputy head teacher and then moving on to take a head teacher responsibility. It's a huge responsibility. Not only do you have the financial element, the HR element, the responsible for the curriculum and how it is taught, but you also have safeguarding responsibilities as well. It is a huge responsibility.
And is there a recruitment problem for head teachers in that we know that there are recruitment problems in subject areas, but are enough people applying? Because what you don't want to do is like a job comes up and you only got 2 applicants.
Well, I think what some schools are seeing for classroom teachers, support staff and for school leaders, a job is advertised and you're getting no applicants. That is the reality across the country. Head teacher vacancies are up 14% on this time last year. And when I speak to deputy heads or assistant head teachers and I say to them, are you thinking about progression? Then the answer is no. We are seeing head teachers leave. They kept schools going during COVID. They've kept them going during a funding crisis, and now they are finding it extremely difficult again. And, nobody wants to become a leader in a school to make cuts. Nobody wants to make a cut to a provision or a subject. No one wants to make cuts to support staff, and no one wants to make redundancies to someone who might have been their former colleague that then will have an impact on the education that children are provided with.
Justin says, I'm not a Tory voter, but I really rate Gillian Keegan. She comes across as competent, kind and human, a rare hat trick for a cabinet member. I suspect she has sympathies with some of the NEU's demands and that her hands are really tied by the Chancellor. He finishes off #vote Lib Dem. Is that your suspicion, that she's actually understands what you're asking for?
I'm not sure she does. I think she speaks very eloquently about some of the issues that we're facing, but I am not sure that she really does understand the workload pressures. The government has said that it would publish its own Working Lives of Teachers survey that back up our information and our surveys that show that pay and workload is a real issue. We still haven't seen that. And I'm not sure she has enough of a handle on the workload issues to put a good plan in place. There is no workforce plan coming forward. What is her plan for the profession? What is her plan for education in the next 18 months? And it is her job to take that plan to the Treasury and to fight for it.
OK, Niamh, that's our time up, I'm afraid. Thank you so much. Hope you've enjoyed the hour, taking calls from our listeners. And we hope to see you again soon, and good luck in the election. That's Niamh Sweeney, Deputy General Secretary of the National Education Union. Now, as you know, there is nothing I like more than a phone-in that contains the word vegan in the question that I'm going to ask. Well, today, Therese Coffey, the DEFRA Minister, remember that stands for Food, Rural Affairs, Environment. She is in America speaking to the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture Winter Conference in Washington. She's told them, don't worry, I'm not going all vegan and vegetarian on you. Meat is still very much on my dietary plate. Is it still on yours? Because there is mounting evidence that many people are turning